recorders. One was a FDFR, that is a flight data recorder. FD. That was actually in what we consider good condition. As part of that process, it was soaked in alcohol overnight. It was then opened today, and we have a high level of confidence that we will be able to get a full download in the very near future. Now, once we do have that download, we will not be releasing immediately the information regarding it.
But it can cover it up.
We will have to go through, correct the data sets, make sure they're synchronized. This has approximately up to possibly 2,000 data points. Is that right, Bryce? So all of that has to be synchronized and looked at. It's a very laborious practice. It takes a lot of time. Regarding the CRJ's cockpit voice recorder, once it was recovered and opened, we found that it had water intrusion. That is not uncommon. It is not an unusual event for us to receive a recorder with water intrusion.
Yeah, some bullshit.
We deal with that all the time. Our recorder division is one of the best in the country, in the world actually. We have recorders sent everywhere, so there's a step.
Yeah, some bullshit.
The CVR was soaked overnight in ionized water, at which point the team put the CVR into a vacuum oven in order to extract moisture. They are still checking electrical connections to determine if they're ready to try a download. It is one step of many steps that we will take in order to get that data, but we have a very high level of confidence that we will have it. We just have to work through a number of steps.
Yeah, listen to him. He's so dumb.
Lastly, on recorders, the Sikorsky, where the CRJ has two separate recorders, the Sikorsky has a combined cockpit voice recorder and digital flight data recorder. It's in one box. I can report to you now, we have recovered the Sikorsky black box. It is safely at the NTSB headquarters. It will begin an evaluation, just as the other two recorders did last night, to determine when and how to take action. I can tell you from a visual inspection, we saw no exterior damage that would indicate that it was compromised at this time. So we have a high level of confidence that we will be able to have a full extraction from that as well. Those are some of the significant updates we have right now. Obviously, we'll be doing some more in the essence of time and making sure our team gets back. I think we're going to be able to take maybe 4 or 5 questions.
4 or 5 questions.
I'll call on you and I'll repeat it. So we'll try to play that game a little bit, please. Right here. Your name and outlet, please.
Captain Sully Sullivan, one of the heroes of the incident on the Hudson, has said that we absolutely should be reviewing airspace, not just here but in other places where there's a complex mix of traffic. Is he right? Is there time for a permanent shift in DC and across the country to keep airspace safe and separated between military and civilian aircraft?
So the question for those watching, is it this time now for us to possibly deconflict or change some of the airspace where military aircraft operate with commercial aircraft? I can't give you a definitive answer on that. What I can say is in this incident, it should not have happened. We have in aviation what's called a Swiss cheese approach, wherein if something fails, a backup should catch it. Multiple layers of redundancy. It's been a very long time since we've had a major aviation incident in the United States, and that's the reason why it's one of the safest forms of transportation in the country. But the only way they do that is by investigating what happens now and then making recommendations in the future. Again, the NTSB has done 100,000 aviation investigations. We've issued 15,000 recommendations. Over 84% have been accepted. Once this investigative report comes out, we will be advocating probably for years for changes that need to be made, but we'll not speculate on what needs to be done until we have the facts. Hey, I'll call on people. Sorry.
Suburban Dave Jefferson from Reuters. Can you talk about how long you think it takes to recover the debris, how long you plan to be on site, and have you got any early...
Can you lie
data
some
off
more?
the,
Guy's sweating profusely.
I think that was 3 or 4 together. How long the debris will take, how long we'll be on site, and have we gotten any information off of the air traffic control tapes? The debris, we are hopeful once the mapping is done, that it will be done in what I will call quick order. And I can make no guarantees of that because first and foremost, we need to make every effort to make sure we're recovering every one of the people that perished in this accident. We'll have some cranes that'll be coming up, and once that happens, you'll see a lot
Send
more
people
activity.
to
We'll
down
be
there.
moving that in, but I don't want to give you a definitive
guy's a
time.
joke.
I would say we'll start in earnest probably on Sunday, and it will go through next week, and some of that's contingent upon weather and other things. Regarding the ATC tapes, we've received a lot of different information on ATC, and so I'm going to I'm just going to preempt it. Off-the-shelf software programs are not always as accurate as the data we specifically get from ADSB, from the black boxes. All of that are factors that come into our investigation. So we will not speculate about ATC tapes that you may have heard and seen online or snippets. We are getting the full cooperation that we need to be able to make an accurate assessment and to make sure what we are saying is factual and that it will help and aid in the entire investigation. You?
Cooper from Channel 7 in Boston. Is there anything glaring from the videos that we've all seen that will tell you that the pilot in the Black Hawk helicopter made a mistake?
The question is, based on the videos, have we drawn any conclusions? We have not. We know that there was a significant incident in which the 2 aircraft collided,
We saw that too.
a pretty significant fireball. If you will recall, even after the first day, we only had maybe 1 or 2 grainy images that were coming out. We're seeing more and more at this time. So we're still collecting data, but we are not going to opine
This guy.
until we see a lot of other things in there. A couple more?
More.
Yes, sir.
On team with CNN, how critical is it to interview the controller in the tower CAD? And how concerning is it to you, the reports that that controller is working 2 positions at the same time?
So the question was, how critical are the air traffic control interviews and basically staffing? So air traffic control interviews are critical. That's the reason why there's a process in place. That began immediately after the accident. It was preservation of that evidence. It was immediately taking down notes, getting logs, all that information. We will go back and look at any air traffic controller that was involved in this. We'll go back and look at their past probably 72 hours, even 2 or 3 weeks. We'll look at their training, their hiring, everything,
Everything.
what they probably ate that day. But it is not one point that tells us everything. It's layered into a lot of other information that's very critical. Regarding staffing, the FAA has had a very robust plan in looking at staffing. Obviously, we'll be looking at not only staffing that day, but progressively staffing. How many people, what job functions they were doing? Were they being combined? Were they not? What was the weather outside? What was the number of landings? I recall back during COVID, 1 runway was being used. Runway 1, that was the only one. 33, as traffic came back, started being opened up. So we would look at changes in traffic patterns, construction at the airport, all of that. It all paints a very big picture.
Follow up on that.
Who are you? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Leo with AP. Have investigators interviewed air traffic controllers at the time?
The question is, have we interviewed air traffic controllers?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, they must have told him not to say nothing. He didn't touch about what happened to the crash. He just talked about what they found in the recorders and how long that shit gonna take. This guy, he's a DEI. He ain't shit. Somebody told him not to say nothing. All right, guys, we're going home. Had a late appointment. This guy here, he is a joke.
An Army helicopter, which cost the lives of 67 people. It looks like there is a crane on the scene right now. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announcing that the FAA will restrict helicopter traffic around Reagan National Airport airspace. And for good reason. Military helicopter flights reportedly forced at least 2 planes to abort landings at the airport in the week before the deadly. One of those close calls came just 24 hours before the collision. Additionally, it has been revealed that air traffic control staffing was, quote, not normal at the time of the collision. And one of the controllers was apparently allowed to leave their shift early right before the fatal crash.
No, he won't be
President Trump is vowing to fix the DEI rot at the FAA by ordering a review of all federal aviation hiring and safety decisions in response. Here's the president.
This was all caused by bad rules, regulations, and other things by Biden, the Biden administration. And when you look at the way they ran things, in fact, if you look, we hired, one of the first things I told them to do is get talented people in those beautiful towers overlooking runways. You better get them in there fast because we don't have people there that are qualified. And you knew that because planes were landing very, very late. It was all because of weak rules in the Biden administration.
On the crash, do you have any concerns that your commentary about things you have described as common sense or your observations could in any way interfere with the thorough investigation of the crash?
No, I think they'll do an investigation. It'll probably come out the way I said it. I was right on all of it, but they'll still do an investigation just to check it out.
But instead of conceding that the president has a point on raising standards for people who help fly our planes, all the liberal media wants to do is attack, attack, attack.
When you talk about DEI and Trump, it means despicable, enraging idiocy.
He does 3 minutes of let's pause in silence, and then let's blame the blacks, let's blame the disabled.
You know, that's what diversity is, and that is what the president said, that black, brown people, women, and people with disabilities caused this crash.
What he is saying is that the only people who are competent to run anything in this country are white men.
His instinct is never to bring people together, but even in some stunning fashion, try to blame others.
I got to tell you, Jesse, the claim that when he talks about DEI and lower standards, their interpretation is that what he's saying is that only white people are competent. Are they stupid? Do they not know what DEI is about?
They know, but they can't admit it because it was their idea. The politicians demanded that Reagan add all these extra flights to this airport because they all need to get home to their districts to have 3- and 4-day weekends. But the politicians didn't staff Reagan. Reagan wasn't staffed. It's the busiest runway in the country, and they don't have enough people. But they have enough people at the Department of Veterans Affairs where they're having orgies. They have 60 DEI employees at the VA. But they don't have enough at a control tower at Reagan, the busiest runway. They could have had enough, but Biden wouldn't let white guys in. According to a lawsuit, 1,000 white guys who had perfect scores. One guy had 100% on the entrance exam to be an air traffic controller. Biden said no, that's still in litigation. I had a guest on last night who flies these Army choppers, and she said that the air traffic control communication was bad. It was poor, it was vague, and that could have caused this crash. And no one knows why this Black Hawk was flying in this flight path anyway. But why don't we have enough guys? Also, not only the staffing, was because of the pandemic, we stopped for 2 years training these guys. How is that not an essential worker? So we have no one to go onto these towers and control this. Only 1% of air traffic facilities in this entire country have hit their staffing targets. That was last year. That was under Mayor Pete. So this is poor management, it's poor priorities, and if they have a problem with it in the media, it's called constructive criticism.
You know, Katie, the truth is that they're making DEI about race when it's about intelligence, it's about competence, it's about recognizing that we need the smartest people doing surgery, flying aircrafts, protecting the American people. We know certain things. We know that the helicopter was at 200 feet, was supposed to be, and then it was at 350. Right. We know Jesse's right about the controller saying, do you see a plane, without identifying which plane it was, because there was one landing and one taking off. So that's a problem. Now we hear today that there was a controller who left early.
Yeah. Well, Washington, D.C. and Reagan National have been managing these types of flights with the different elevations, the planes, commercial planes, and the helicopters for years. There's been tens of thousands of flights in and out of Reagan without having this problem. So the question is, what has changed? I mean, if you live in D.C. and you fly in and out of D.C. all the time, you see these helicopters all around town. And the question is, well, why is it there are helicopters in these paths anyway? They're doing military training. There's no other place in the whole country they can do military training that's not literally in the pathway of these commercial airline flights. Also, these helicopters are there because high profile politicians or cabinet members or people who want to get out of traffic and get somewhere quickly, they want a helicopter ride from the Pentagon to the White House to Langley to the CIA, etc. So that's why these fights are taking place. It's not that they're necessary, but they have been able to manage them. And so you have to ask the question of what has changed here? And Jesse's right. You know, there's this class action lawsuit against the FAA for turning away thousands of highly qualified individuals who applied for these FAA jobs because they weren't the right skin color. So when you talk about the diversity and the inclusion and equity, it's actually a violation of the Civil Rights Act. First of all, it's discrimination. And second of all, it's dangerous. And maybe, you know, we still need to know what happened in this situation, but it's clear that when you're hiring people for very sensitive jobs based on skin color or gender or whatever else, rather than merit or 100% scores on an FAA test, that there's going to be a problem somewhere at some point.
You know, Greg, one of the things that we found out is that there are 3 people on the Black Hawk. One is, I think they call him a crew chief, and then they had the one pilot with 1,000 hours, the other with 500 hours. One of the families is saying, we don't want the name of our family member identified. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't want to answer that question because that to me, it's not my area of expertise. I think that the topic that interests me is, can you blame the Biden administration and can you be suspicious about the competency of the FAA? And I say you can blame the Biden administration and you can be suspicious because who brought the suspicion on? Well, the Democratic Party covered up an incapacitated president. That is the most important office in the land, and it was deliberately compromised. So why shouldn't you wonder about every single institution underneath that? If they were that cavalier about the president of the United States, we should be worried. I said this before, there is a crisis of competence, and we saw it in that debate. We had also a guy in charge in nuclear safety who was a kleptomaniac fetishist. There was no one at the wheel. So this goes back to why is Trump succeeding? Because he's establishing order among disorder, whether it is crime, immigration, foreign policy. And that appeal to order comes from this overwhelming sense of chaos, which comes from the top down. The hood ornament of chaos was the president of the United States. He reflected the incoherence and the confusion and the absence of leadership that spread out throughout the entire governmental system. Trump is the realignment. And he's doing it through a very simple prism. America first, driven by common sense. It could be applied to every segment of the government and almost every segment of society, especially when there's a segment that feels that it might be in disarray and you see this accident, you wonder, how does that happen? How does somebody leave early? Was somebody inexperienced? You have every right to be suspicious because it may be connected to the overarching crisis of competence. It's a crisis of competence. It causes a lack of confidence. And the solution that Trump is offering, it may not be right in this case. It may not be DEI. But you sure as hell can ask that question because it seems to us that every institution has been degraded in the last, 4 years. You can go back even further. When Trump came in, he didn't know what he got. He didn't know what he got. You can go, oh, but this was under him. He didn't have a clue. The government was already screwed. we were screwed. Now he's doing the unscrewing.
The unscrewing.
Yes.
Unscrewing. That's good to know. But what you've got now is once we find out the facts, and I think the facts are going to be pretty easy to find out. I think we may already know them. It's the why. You know, why do we have so many vacancies in the FAA?
I would love to know the answers to that. I think the NTSB representatives have seemed really good in these press conferences, very authoritative, talking about the time that they need, but saying I'm going to be as transparent as possible. They get their investigations done usually in less time than they allot themselves to do it. So hopefully we get answers. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with asking questions about our procedures that ended up with a completely cataclysmic American horror story and what happened. Yeah, we all agree on that. But when Jesse says that President Trump is offering constructive criticism, it is not constructive criticism to say this is Joe Biden's fault or this is Pete Buttigieg's fault.
Why not?
Because that's just blaming your political adversary. It's not taking any responsibility. It's not sharing the risk. Right, but you know what? Actually, the nifty part a bit about being the 45th and 47th president is you were also the guy before. And Greg is right. These policies were in place under Trump. I went to try to find out about your dwarf recruitment. Yes. And that existed under the Trump administration.
Dwarf quota?
Yes, actually. It's up from June 2017 to June 2021. There's even a post from April 2019. FAA provides careers to people with disabilities. The list.
Good, give them a job. Don't put them in a control tower. No, I mean, we're talking apples and oranges.
No,
That's
we're
not what it's about. It's about the fact that you were explaining why Doge is necessary. Trump didn't know about that. Let's be obvious.
So then Trump doesn't know what he is in control of, at least
Why
for the
didn't
first 4
Biden
years.
fill the jobs?
He knows what he's
This
getting
is-
rid of
you
because
guys-
I don't think there's going to be a dwarf quota after this.
By the way, lay off the little people.
Sorry, Greg.
Go ahead.
You know that you're being hypocritical about this. I started with there should be a full investigation. I want this, and there will be. But you cannot deny the fact that when Trump came in to give the press conference, the first one yesterday, he did the nice part. Then he found himself again. He immediately said DEI, DEI. Then the support staff, Duffy Hegseth, said DEI. Then the picture came out and it was a white guy who had done 1,000 hours. So we moved on to incompetence, right? If that had been a minority person, or I heard, I mean, they're trying to say that this pilot.
But DEI is about incompetence. That's the point.
You don't think that there is a reason that he shifted gears after he saw?
We're not mind readers.
You're not. No, you're never mind readers with
No,
Trump.
I don't read
you're
minds.
Just mind readers.
You know, that's why the
with Biden when
left
you sit
lost.
and
They thought they could read people's minds, and you fell prey to.
You know what I don't have to mind read about when you say that everyone loves this because it's so streamlined and he's been so successful. I know that there is chaos because of this, of sending out messages saying.
Because you read Peggy Noonan's piece.
It's also about because I saw portals being down. I saw emails going out to people saying, "Oh, you could take a buyout." I saw emails going out that you're going to be fired tomorrow. I saw.
You know what? I'm worried about more people coming out of the frigid water and why they're in that water than whether or not you're going to be, you got a job or you
You're worried about it if it's Joe Biden's fault. You're not.
No, I'm not. I'm worried about human. This is the worst. This is the worst crash since 2001.
I don't think you interpreted that correctly.
All right, coming up, they just can't help themselves.
Candidates who want to be the next DNC chair attending a forum to pitch why they're the one who can pull the party out of their Trump depression slump and start winning again. Unfortunately, they just can't seem to get it together on why identity politics is a loser. Check out this amazingly stupid moment.
So I'm going to, I have a show of hands. How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat? Okay. So that's good. You all passed.
And the guy they're trying to replace, who presided over the loss of the Senate, House, and presidency, Jamie Harrison, not only thinks Joe Biden could have won, but that Kamala could stage a comeback.
Should Kamala Harris run again? Yes, she wants to. You think she could win? I believe she can. Donald Trump and Barack Obama are just enigmas in politics. I think they do something different to the electorate every time they run.
So you're saying Donald Trump was unbeatable?
No, not he was. Joe Biden figured out how to, right? But Kamala Harris didn't. could have used more time and other things. But in the end of the day, Trump won't be on the ballot. He's a lame duck now.
Well, against my better judgment, I'll go to you, Jessica, since you're the Democrat. We'll just get you out of the way quickly. This is your party. How do you think the fight for leadership is going?
There was more to the forum, obviously, than that question.
No, that was
I think that yes, it was one question, and then everyone went home. I think that you could obviously make a case. There are some voters out there who don't want to vote for a woman. There are some voters out there who don't want to vote for a person of color. But generally speaking, that wasn't the cause of our loss, for sure. If Biden had been the candidate, I'm pretty sure Trump would have won over 400 electoral votes. So we're putting that to the side. What I found most interesting, and this is in line with Bernie Sanders' orthodoxy, is one of his senior advisors, Faz Shakir, was up there, and he was not playing around with the identity politics at all. He is the only one who wouldn't commit to increasing the at-large DNC seats for trans people or creating a Muslim caucus. He said, "I'm frustrated by the way in which we utilize identity to break ourselves apart." Now, I think that is the right message for the moment, though Bernie Sanders always had trouble building a coalition beyond white voters. Like, black voters in particular were never into him in 2016 or 2020. But I do think that injecting that kind of thinking into whatever the next stage of the DNC is, whether it's Martin O'Malley or Ben Wickler, when they elect someone else, is going to be really important. And I hope that consultants who work with progressive candidates that have a populist working class message like Bernie are taken seriously.
Janine?
Well, I have to respond to something that Jamie Harrison just said when he talked about Kamala in that sound. He said Kamala could have used more time, but suggesting that if she had more time, she might have won. She had 4 years, Jamie, in the White House, 4 years to make herself a star. So, look, I'm tired of all of the arguments that they're using. They have to rationalize in their own minds why they lost, and they come up with these universal excuses without identifying what it is that the American people want. We want a good economy. We want the border closed. We want crime to be, criminals to be locked up after they're arrested if they can't make bail or if they're from another country. They lied to us about a radical agenda and they're lazy and inarticulate. Okay, that's who Kamala was anyway. So stop with the generalizations. There's a million reasons why, and they're so smart they should analyze them.
Katie, we sometimes joke about, I have advice for the Democratic Party. No, don't tell them advice. Do you think that the country and the party system is healthier when you have two competent parties, or do you enjoy the Democrats suffering for long periods of time?
I think it's fun to watch them, having to wait around in the problems that they created for themselves. This forum, if Democrats want to find a future for themselves, they cannot do it in a place like Washington, D.C. with MSNBC and with Jonathan Capehart, who, after everyone raised their hand, said, "You answered the right way." He's at the Washington Post. They have to get out of this D.C. bubble with the media there, which is the most far-left radical faction that we have in this entire country. They are concentrated there. But the bigger problem for Democrats is that for the past decade, really it started under Obama, they've only built their entire strategy on divisiveness, on saying if you want criminals off of the street, you're a racist who wants to put minorities in jail. If you want closed borders, you're a racist who doesn't want people to come in. You're xenophobic. So they're going to have to come up with a whole entirely different argument structure because they've completely relied on identity politics to try and win. It failed in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. It failed again with Kamala Harris. And while they're preaching all of this to the country, they're the ones who put Joe Biden in the White House, the white guy. So they've got to get out to the steel mills, to the places that they've lost with the minorities, with the union voters. They can't be doing these seminars in the heart of DC and expecting to get some kind of different result.
Greg, what if the Democrats just learned how to say no? No, you can't come to the country. No, you can't play women's sports. That would be a nice story.
No, I wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
By the way, let's not forget, they do control the cities. So we're great nationally, but we got to remember the fact that our cities are still run by libs. But got to remind the Dems that they didn't lose to a garden variety Republican like a Jeb Bush or a Mitt Romney. They lost to what they deemed was the worst ever human being in recent history. So think about that. With your messaging and your personnel, you lost the popular vote, the electoral vote, you had the House, the Senate, to Adolf Hitler squared. What does that say about you and your strategy and your values and your messaging if you're less popular than Genghis Khan with syphilis? The fact is, you're still doubling down. We watched that, embracing what the world repudiated, and you're right. Inevitably, identity politics results in cannibalism. You run out of external targets. You chase out people in the party who wise up, and so you have to turn on each other because ultimately everybody becomes a party of one when it comes to wokeism. So, in a weird way, I think what you're seeing, and I don't know if they'll wake up to it, but they're like the classroom bully who wonders why no one came to his birthday party when they said that they would. You know, now the bully is sitting by himself with an untouched ice cream cake. Because the bully created the largest preference falsification in political history. No one wanted to tell them that they suck. So they thought they were ascendant, they thought they were loved, they thought they were admired, and people just nodded along because they didn't want to talk to you. Everybody around you lied to you because you're an insufferable shit.
And no one's coming to your party.
Yes.
I'll eat the cake.
We'll cut it with a sword. I had grabbed the maple syrup and the avocados. President Trump is about to unleash the first tariff war.
President Trump confirming he will be going forward with his long-awaited 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and a 10% tariff on China.
Is there anything China, Canada, and Mexico can do tonight to forestall your implementation of tariffs tomorrow?
No.
Not a negotiating tool?
No, it's not. No, it's a pure economic. We have big deficits with, as you know, with all three of them. And in one case, they're sending massive amounts of fentanyl. Why should we be subsidizing Canada? They, it's wonderful. I have so many friends in Canada. It's a great place.
But Canada, the 51st governor, is vowing he will fight the tariffs.
If the president does choose to implement any tariffs against Canada, we're ready with a response. A purposeful, forceful, but reasonable, immediate response. It's not what we want, but if he moves forward, we will also act.
So, Jesse, are the sled dogs ready to defend Canada from the tariffs?
No. And they don't have to if they just become a state. We can drop the trade war right now. So Canada plays games with dairy. They invoke all these barriers. So our people that want to sell milk and cream and cheese into Canada, they can't do it because they're violating the spirit of the USMCA. They're also dumping all this cheap lumber into our country. They subsidize their timber industry and then come down and they undercut our timber industry here. Mexico's playing dirty with corn. They import all of their corn, and they import it from us. They love tortillas, tacos. It's in everything down there. And they say, we will not take your corn if it's, a GMO, genetically modified corn. And we're losing a lot of money. They're also sneaking in Chinese cars. The Chinese are brilliant. They're just sending parts into Mexico, and then they're just assembling in plants, and then it's made in Mexico, and then they can sell them here. That's got to stop.
So, Judge, this isn't just about the economics, which the president laid out. He also wants more cooperation on fentanyl and terrorists coming across the northern and southern borders.
To be honest with you, 25% tariff isn't enough for the harm that has been caused by Canada and Mexico, by the open borders. And to be honest with you, the overrun borders and the crime and the fentanyl and the deaths, when it would be very easy for them to control the border. Unfortunately, you've got the cartels that are running the southern border. They're literally, there's rifle cover for the cartels to be able to come across to the United States, and it is stunning that they are able to get away with this. And so now the cartels are now foreign terrorist organization. We can affect their money, but we really have to get Mexico to pay up for what they've done, and Canada as well, for not protecting the border. And we are trying to protect it, but they are not doing anything. And the truth is that fentanyl steel is coming from China. It's being manufactured and imprinted in Mexico. The money laundering is going down there, and they're just pushing it into the United States. So, the tariffs are more than just about tariffs. They're about our way of life and protecting Americans.
Yeah, and Greg, this is a president who believes in tariffs to get certain policies changed towards the U.S., but he also believes in eventually getting rid of the income tax for Americans and making the country richer through tariffs. So there are lots of strategies at play.
I love that strategy. I'm not sure if it's possible, but I did my homework. That's the thing about Trump. He forces you out of your comfort zone of ignorance. My default system being that, as a libertarian Republican for free trade, I'm against tariffs, even though I really never read about it. It's just something that, I believed in because as a free market libertarian, tariffs are bad. Government, don't mess with the prices. You got to set, let the prices set themselves. But I understand how tariffs can be used as a tool at your disposal, especially when I go back to the A block. The realignment that Trump is doing with his prism of America first, suddenly tariffs are not off the table. They are but a tool to realign America as the priority. And it's no bluffs given. It's like, I may do this, I may not. Starting tomorrow, the 10% on China, that's going to be a tough one because we buy a lot of crap from China, and emphasis on crap. But if you have a problem with that, we've had over, it has been going down, the deaths from fentanyl, but 100,000, it was over 100,000 people dying from fentanyl. No tariff is small enough to deal with that. It's affected everybody's lives. It comes from Russia. China. We have to do something about that.
So Jessica, we've got about a minute until this new briefing from the NTSB, but your thoughts about the tariffs?
Tariffs are a tax on the consumer, and President Trump admitted as much when he was talking to reporters today, where he said that sometimes passed on to the consumer, don't worry, just a short-term disruption. And Donald Trump promised all of his voters that everything would be better when he got into office. So Tuesday went by, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The weekend, maybe you take a break, he has to golf a lot. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday again. And now we're talking about 25% tariffs on some of our biggest trading partners. Eggs, hot topics. Now we've got bird flu, plus we got a ton of eggs from Canada. You talk about the cheap lumber flooding the zone. If we are going to deal with our housing problem, got to get more supply up.
All right.
Taxing you.
There's Fox News alert. The NTSB is now.
As January, as we have already discussed today, if you were here this morning for the live stream, January has been sort of the nicest way to really put it is a shit show. That's what January has consisted of. And we're just going to continue on with it. Might as well end out January 31st with a little bit more crappy information that has been coming out. So we talked the last couple of days, Thursday, yesterday, and this morning, about the passenger plane and Black Hawk helicopter crash over Reagan National Airport and Potomac River, or whatever that's called, Potomac. I never know if I'm saying that one right or not, but there's more information that has come out today. This was posted to the Washington Times or Washington Post, and wait, which one is it? I don't remember. Either way, it says everything that we have been talking about over the past 24 hours, everything that I was concerned about and that we discussed has now been put out as fact into the world by mainstream media. All right, so we're still going to take it with a grain of salt, obviously, because it's mainstream media, but the fact that this is now being published somewhere outside of X or YouTube or Facebook and those kind of places gives it a little more ass behind it in the eyes of the powers that be. So I've screenshot this whole article, and I would just want to kind of go over it with you, and then we're going to jump into some other stuff. But this is what they are now determining has occurred between the Black Hawk and the passenger plane. I think it was American Airlines 5342 or 5432, because I get dyslexic, unfortunately, sometimes. This is what they are saying, okay? It says here, just came out today. Clues emerging from the moments before the deadly collision on Wednesday night between an Army helicopter and an American Airlines passenger jet suggest that multiple layers of the country's aviation safety apparatus failed. According to flight records, a preliminary internal report from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, interviews with current and former air traffic controllers and others briefed on the matter. So they have gone and talked to a bunch of different people, and this is what they have come up with so far. Again, this is without having the black boxes from the airplane. I've had conflicting information on if there are black boxes on Army helicopters, on Black Hawks themselves, and then somebody else was saying that, I haven't been able to prove this part, but somebody else was saying that it was a Black Hawk Gold. I don't know what that means. If you do, if you happen to have any military experience or Black Hawk piloting experience or know what Black Hawk Gold means, please let us know here in the live chat or in the comment section once this is up as a regular video. But it says here, the helicopter flew outside its approved flight path. Now, if you watched any of the videos of how this occurred, we have all said, I am not alone in this, but we have all said something is not right. And I've said it from the very beginning, that sense of ick, or that sense of no, it's kind of stuck with me, that gut feeling that there's something wrong. Now, this article is not going to come out and say anything was deliberate, but pay attention to exactly what they are saying and then make up your own mind on how you feel about this, all right? It says here, the helicopter flew outside its approved flight path. The American Airlines pilots most likely did not see the helicopter close by as they made a turn towards the runway, which we talked about because they were moved from runway 1 to runway 33 at the last minute. And the air traffic controller, who was juggling 2 jobs at the same time, was unable to keep the helicopter and the plane separated. An FAA spokesman said the agency could not comment on the ongoing investigation. Obviously, of course, they can't give you all the details, which is being led by the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, which was under Pete Buttigieg, whatever, and now it's under Sean Duffy, I believe. Sean Duffy, he was sworn in, and then an hour later, he is on the ground running, boots on the ground for this horrible accident, is what we're going to call it for now, between the helicopter and the passenger plane. But according to this, crash investigators will spend the next several months reviewing flight data, recordings from inside the cockpits, weather patterns, as well as interviewing controllers and others involved to try to figure out what went wrong. All right. But the catastrophe already appeared to confirm what pilots, air traffic controllers, and safety experts have been warning for years. Growing holes in the aviation system could lead to the kind of crash that left 67 people dead in the Potomac River in Washington. Even before an official cause is determined, there were signs Wednesday that pilots and air traffic controllers at Reagan National were not operating under optimal conditions. So before that, we talked about it, that there were, even the day before and the day of, there were numerous instances where it was too close for comfort, where you could visually see in the flight paths that there were too many helicopters and airplanes. They were getting way too close to each other, which makes absolutely no sense. So according to this, the duties of handling air traffic control for helicopters and for planes, because again, both of them are in that area, at Reagan National on Wednesday night were combined before the deadly crash. We talked about it earlier, and I told you that there was one person working in the air traffic control in that tower. One person. Normally there are 2, and they only had 1 when this crash occurred. Okay, we talked about it earlier. It says here that they were combined. So normally there's 1 person for the helicopters and 1 person for the planes. So you are focused on individual sections, I guess is the right word to use here. And you are able to see exactly what is happening here, and you are able to see exactly what's happening here. And between the 2 of them also communicating, they're able to make sure that there is no collisions like we had on Wednesday night. Now, 1 person left, 1 person now has to watch both, all the planes, all the helicopters, try to keep everybody straight, make sure he's talking to the right helicopter at the right time and pointing out the correct plane at the correct time, and vice versa. So it says here that this left an air traffic controller handling dual roles, according to a person briefed on the staffing and the report. Typically, 1 person handles both helicopter and plane duties after 9:30 p.m. This is important, when traffic at Reagan begins to lessen. But the supervisor combined those duties sometime before 9:30 and allowed 1 air traffic controller to leave, according to the person, who was not authorized to speak publicly about the investigation into the crash, and the crash occurred just before 9 p.m. Now, we watched the flight pattern data of the American Airlines 5342 or 5432 coming in, and you could see how many planes right before it were coming in. It did not look like a slow evening, all right? And for them to have let one person go and drop it down to one by themselves before their normal allotted time of 9:30 already seems fishy. And again, I'm not trying to be that person, but I still feel like there's something wrong here, which is why we're having this conversation the way we're having it, right? It says here, while there were no unusual factors causing a distraction for controllers at night, staffing was not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. This is according to a preliminary FAA report. So even the Federal Aviation Administration is saying, hey, listen, this should not have happened. There should have been 2 people up there. One person being there doesn't make sense. It was too early. They were too busy. There was no reason for that supervisor to give that other person to allow them to leave early. There was no reason for that other person to ask to leave early, if they even did. That's the part we don't know yet. We don't know if that person asked to leave early or if they were told to leave early. And that, I think, will make a massive difference in how this is looked at as well. If the supervisor said, hey, listen, I know we're really busy and you're both doing a really good job, but you should just go ahead and leave, that's fishy and shady as hell, right? Now, on Thursday, 5 current and former controllers said that the controller in the tower should have more proactively directed the helicopter and the plane to fly away from each other. Instead, the controller asked the helicopter to steer clear of the plane, which we heard in the recordings that we played yesterday, and I'm sure you guys have heard on other news stations or channels or whatever else that we listened to it, and the air traffic controller asked them if they had visual of the plane, and the Blackhawk said they had visual, but nobody confirmed which plane and at what, like, I don't know if this is how this works, but what level of visual, like above, below, in front, behind, none of that kind of stuff was mentioned in any of these things. And I think that has a lot to do with it, right? So it says here, some of the current and former controllers said the darkness could have made it more difficult for pilots to accurately gauge the distance between themselves and other aircraft. Some wondered whether the helicopter pilots mistook a different plane for the American jet, which is what we talked about earlier, because there was a flight, if you watch the video, there's a flight farther ahead that was clearly headed towards runway 1, which is where 90+% of those planes go. If the helicopter is being asked if they saw the plane, they're going to be looking at the one that's about to land and say yes, because the other one was not in the normal path for planes to be coming in to land, because it had been rerouted weirdly to runway 33. Some people are saying that runway 33 made sense because it's a shorter runway, because this was a smaller plane. It didn't need the length of runway. It was a busy airport, whatever else, but it still is a factor that has to be taken into consideration. You've lost one air traffic controller. It was sent home early by a supervisor. You also had, was it the supervisor or the air traffic controller who deterred the plane to a completely different runway? A lot of things going on here that they have to look at, right? It says here that the helicopter was supposed to be flying closer to the bank of the Potomac. I can never say the river's name. Potomac. I don't know why my brain decides to just crap out every single time. The bank of that river, and lowered to the ground as it traversed the busy Reagan National Airspace. 4 people briefed on the incident said. Now, a lot of people have been saying here on YouTube and over on X, where I've been posting about this, and on everybody else's posts, that these helicopters are not supposed to be above 200 feet from the ground. There is a level about at which they're supposed to fly, and flying is at 200 feet. The planes that are coming in to land, they said, are generally 400 to 300 feet when these helicopters are crossing over the river. That's another thing. The flight path that the American Airlines ended up taking normally would take it over the river one way, but because it was moved from runway 1 to runway 33, it was having it fly basically parallel to the river as opposed to perpendicular. It was going parallel to it, so it was over the water for longer also, which is something to think about. If this crash had occurred in a different spot, the plane and the helicopter would not have landed in water. They would have landed either on sections of the airport, or on housing, because if you watch any of the flight videos, and I have them saved here and I might remember to show you, but if you watch any of the videos that people have been posting up where they show you what it looks like flying into Reagan National and flying out of Reagan National Airport, you can see that it is surrounded by businesses and residential areas. If the plane and the Black Hawk had collided anywhere else, it would have taken even more lives, because it would have landed in places where people were, as opposed to in the water, which is also either interesting or, you know, a godsend, depending on how this all plays out. Before a helicopter can enter any busy commercial airspace, it must get the approval of an air traffic controller. In this case, the pilot asked for permission to use a specific predetermined route that lets helicopters fly at a low altitude along the bank on the east side of the Potomac, a location that would have let it avoid the American Airlines plane. This is where it gets squirrely, I guess is the right word to use. And to me, it gets worse, because this is, okay. So the pilot, you have a pilot, a co-pilot, and a crew chief, I believe is what they said, in this helicopter, in this Black Hawk. The pilot was a gentleman, they're saying right now, named Ryan O'Hara, which is interesting because that's the last name of another airport. And then the female pilot, they have not named the female pilot that I've seen. It's not the transgender person, Joe Ellis or Joe L, whatever, that everybody's saying. But it is a woman. The man pilot had 1,000 hours of flight time. The female co-pilot was at 500 hours of flight time. What's interesting is that 500 hours of flight time, generally speaking, they would not be the main pilot on a route like this, from what I have gathered and what I've heard. Okay, now again, this is where, to me, more questions than answers come in. Relaxing Cat, thank you so much. So listen to this. It says the requested route, referred to as Route 4 at Reagan National. They have route names. That way they all follow the same path. They know 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. This is the path you take. This is the height you're going to be at. This is your starting point and your end point. It says here it followed a specific path known to the air traffic controller and helicopter pilots. The helicopter confirmed visual sight of a regional jet, and the air traffic controller instructed the helicopter to follow the route and fly behind the plane. But the helicopter did not follow the intended route, the people briefed on the matter have said. Rather, it was above 300 feet when it was supposed to be flying below 200 feet, and it was at least half a mile off the approved route when it collided with a commercial jet. Again, I hate being that person, but everything here adds up to this not being human error, but maybe human purpose. And that's a shitty situation to find yourself in, or a crappy way to think about this, because you do not ever want to think that somebody purposely took the lives of somebody else. The people on that airplane were coming from Wichita, Kansas. There were children on that plane, young children. It was the U.S. figure skating team who had just been in Wichita, Kansas for the national championships, I believe. There were Russian figure skaters on there as well that had won the 1996 Olympics, I believe. And there were a lot of people on there, like whole teams. And the city of Wichita, Kansas actually put out a statement, and they were like, listen, this may not seem like such a big deal to a lot of big cities, but Wichita is tiny, and this many lives lost is a huge impact on our community. Another thing people have pointed out, and again, this is off topic, but there has been a large uptick, they've been saying, across mainstream media and social media, of tuberculosis in Kansas, weirdly. And so now people are like, what was on that plane? Was tuberculosis on that plane? Were they trying to stop it? And that, to me, is pushing it too far. That is a full-on conspiracy theory. But again, I put nothing past anybody, because things have been proven time and time and time again that there are people out there willing to do shady stuff to get the results that they want from whatever that may be, right? But these are all things to just have in your mind as this is going on. It says here, a senior Army official urged caution in making any assessments until the helicopter's black box could be recovered and analyzed along with other forensic data. The official, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the ongoing inquiry, said the Black Hawk's pilot had flown this route before and were well aware of the altitude restrictions and tight air corridor they were permitted to fly in near the airport. my other question here is, if you have the female co-pilot with the 500 flight hours as the one at the helm doing all of the flying, but you have a gentleman next to her with 1,000 flight hours, and he's the normal pilot, why didn't he take over? Why didn't he stop this route? There's no way you have 3 people in this helicopter who don't realize that they're over 100 feet above where they're supposed to be and over half a mile off of course. You're not going to get to the point where you're allowed to fly a Black Hawk helicopter, number one. Number two, that close to a airport and not understand the routes you're supposed to be on and not even notice when you're even just slightly off. So to be off by half a mile distance-wise and up over 100 feet, whatever-wise, that again, and I hate to say it, but that's what gives me that feeling that something is wrong. I see somebody here saying no one was on the helicopter. Now, we're going to go full-on conspiracy squirrel for just a second, because we did talk about this yesterday, how just a couple weeks ago at Lockheed Martin, they did a demonstration showing how Black Hawk helicopters themselves could be remote control flown from, obviously a remote control, but from anywhere else without needing a pilot, a co-pilot, a whatever else in there. I showed you the video of the Black Hawk flying all by itself. There are people now who are saying that this is another false flag event, FFE, I guess is what we call it, a false flag event, that there was nobody in that helicopter, that the air traffic controller purposely diverted the airplane to runway 1 to have them over the water, to make it harder to find the people, to make it so that it could possibly hurt the black box being submerged in water, to help wipe away any forensics there may have been, that fire might not have done it, but the water could do it. All these different things. And we as a people think this way, obviously, because it's been proven that things like this can happen, right? We don't just wake up one day and start thinking like this. Something had to have made us have this thought process, right? But for it to be possibly unmanned, then the question comes in of, well, the people that they are going to name, because they have not named the female co-pilot, they've named one, and even I don't know if they have, I've just happened to see the name around. It's not in this article anywhere, but somebody, it's been all over social media that it was somebody named Ryan O'Hare, but I have not seen it in a major news publication. I did not hear Donald Trump say any names. So again, it's interesting, and it's something that makes you sit back and go, just not quite sure how to fully think about this. And it sucks from the aspect of, if there are family members of the passengers on that American airline flight who happen to be watching anything on social media or the news or reading these things, it's got to, I understand that me having this conversation and them hearing it has got to be absolutely horrific, and because you're rehashing, but I also want to say, I have seen a couple of interviews so far of parents of children who were on the plane, and I don't want to use the word supposedly, but I'm gonna have to, who were supposedly on the plane. There's a video of a gentleman who had just been texting his wife right before landing, and the camera crew or news crew got to him. He's sitting there waiting for his wife, and then the plane, is hit by this Black Hawk, and he's like, it's the last text I ever got from her, and he's showing the text messages, and my brain is going, none of these people are as distraught as I feel like they should be. And that feels like a crappy thing for me to say, because nobody knows how people are going to deal with shock and grief at the same time. They are talking to these people right as this tragedy is happening. It is completely possible they are completely in shock and nothing has really settled in yet, because this is before bodies have been exhumed. This is before they have a cause of why this really truly happened, all these different things. But anybody who has ties with anybody that is on that plane manifest, the names on that plane, hearing about all this and hearing people like me going, I don't know if this is like how did this really happen? I know that's got to be like salt in a wound, and I apologize, and I don't ever want to be the cause of anybody's grief or anything else, but we also need to have the conversations. If we never had the conversations, then anybody could get away with anything and we would never know what was going on. So I just wanted to mention that. Anyway, according to this, where'd it go? Safety.
I'll have to say that it was an unfortunate tragedy that happened. I watched the video, and in my opinion, that helicopter looked like it was headed straight for the plane, hit it from the rear. And then if you add the fact that these helicopters can be ran by remote control, could it have been hacked and purposely, I'm going to say allegedly, sent on a death path straight to that plane as a way to, I'm just going to say, it just looks like it was, the way that helicopter aimed at that plane, it looked like it headed dead for it, as if it was being controlled, and by the fact that you can control the plane by remote, there's a possibility that the pilots of the helicopters were not in control. They probably couldn't steer it away because it went straight for that plane and hit it in the rear, as if, I don't like saying it, but it looked like somebody was aiming, it looked like it was dead aimed. I'm just gonna put it like that for YouTube purposes. It looked like a dead aim. And if it was a dead aim, it could have been the pilots could not control the steering mechanism of the helicopter for the fact that it was being operated by remote control. Or it could have well been hacked, because they can hack cars now while you're driving around. They could probably hack sophisticated military equipment as well. So I don't know, man. This is something mysterious, and the lack of information is coming out. Were they pilots? Were they not pilots? The fact of the matter is, it looked like that helicopter was not trying to avoid the plane. And for that video information, I would lean remote control or hacked. This is your boy Doug, 60 Gang. Y'all have a blessed evening. Stay safe. Start driving. Stay away from planes. And I'm out.